Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the last day of Culturama, sadly. It is the last weekend. This is the final Saturday, and we're on to Robert Piluso. I want to say, however, after this, we've got two more things. We have Yishin Lai, who writes about making a living as a writer, which she does. My favorite part of her resume is that she was J. Peterman. During the time that J. Peterman was on Seinfeld, she was one of the head writers for the J. Peterman catalog. I know that goal.
Awesome. Oh, what a great fact. Yishan's full of fantastic facts about herself, about the world.
Yeah, she makes a living as a writer, so I think that's a great supplement to teaching. Actually, I think all the teachers are gone. So we've got her coming up. We also have Tim Hatch releasing his book tonight, reading along with Kareem Tayar, who is one of my favorite writers. Robert Piluso, I got to know at Mount SAC, and I've really enjoyed being his colleague. He's somebody who knows things that the rest of us don't. He has MFA in film. He has experience with film and comics in a way that the rest of us don't. So I'm so glad to bring him here and have him tell you about how to develop a comic book page.
Thank you so much for having me, John and Lloyd. I'm very excited very grateful to be here at Culturama. Thank you for the very nice introduction, John. I teach fiction writing at Mount SAC, in addition to freshman composition, critical thinking, intro to mythology, intro to cinema. And so that's kind of where a lot of my training and my background comes from. And I've also been writing and illustrating comics for the past few years now. And so I have some kind of techniques that I've learned during my additional schooling I was talking a little bit about at the Kubert School. So I'm very grateful to all the experts there at the Kubert School. And I'm excited to get to hear from some folks here, and we can talk about your interests too, and kind of an overlay of how to go about thinking about writing a comic page. If folks wouldn't mind, I would like to hear from each of you. If you could do a brief introduction maybe, and then your experience with writing for comics, or what you would like to do with that. If folks wouldn't mind, would that be okay?
Would you like me to start?
Yes, please, John. Thanks.
Okay, so I have no experience with writing for comics. I'm not a visual thinker, so I have a hard time understanding the genre, and which is, it's funny because my wife is a visual artist. When I turn off my camera, you'll see her art. But it's something that fascinates me, and I just want to know more about it. I think I've read 5 comics in my life. Yeah, so it's not a lot.
Right on. I got some stuff I could share with you, John, I think. Well, thanks for being with us, John. Lloyd, did you want to? Are you still here?
Hey guys, I'm Victor.
Hi, Victor.
Nice to meet you. Nice to be here. Mike said the comics is mostly just reading them. I do do a little bit of fan fiction now and again, but I can't draw, but I do the writing.
Okay, cool. Well,
I'm hoping to learn a bit here from you.
awesome. Thank you, Victor. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you very much. And Connie, did you want to?
Yes, I'm Connie Taylor, and I'm a book publisher, but I'm also a writer to some degree, and I've taken a couple comic courses. I don't do any artwork. I have no skill for drawing, but I'm a photographer, so I've done some comic work using pictures, photographs.
Wonderful.
That's what I'm playing around with.
That's so cool, Connie. I really like the idea of that. Very cool. Thank you for being with us, Connie.
Oh, thank you for being here.
You know, it's one of my tricks that a lot of professional artists do is they'll take a photo as the reference of themselves or of someone else who's roughly the same kind of, model, body model, and then to illustrate that based off of that photo reference. And also, there is a very long-standing tradition of using literal photos as the background of different images within a comic. It just gives it an extra little pop. It looks really cool. So there's so much work to be done there that you can use with the resources that you have, and the inclinations that you want to go with. So thank you for being with us, Connie. Lloyd, did you want to introduce?
Oh, I missed. What am I introducing about myself?
If your familiarity with comics or
Oh.
your interest with them.
Oh yeah, sure. So I've always been like a big fan of comics. I was a huge comic book collector for about a 10-year period in my 30s, late 20s, 30s, and stopped because it got to be too much.
Get that.
It got to be too expensive, really. I've read some books on creating comics. I worked with a friend on writing scripts for Batman, just as a exercise, see if we could do it. And one of the projects I'm currently working on is a graphic novel script.
Nice. Super
yeah.
cool, Lloyd.
Yeah, and I have some possible people I can contact in the Philippines who who are artists. Yeah, because it's about being Filipino. So hopefully I get to work on that more over the winter. So
Lloyd, that's awesome, man.
yeah,
Good for you, man.
Yeah, it's been one of my big goals. I want to get a graphic novel published. That'd be awesome.
Do it, dude. That's super cool. Yeah, very, very cool. I'm gonna have some stuff for you today, Lloyd, that it's not like I'm just getting it out of the other book, like Scott McCloud and stuff. Like this is some stuff that is just for, unique to this workshop. So I hope I can share something cool for the writing process behind that. Thank you for being with us, Lloyd. Up next, Thomas. Do you want to do intros or? Okay, maybe. Michelle?
Thomas and Michelle are in the same house, and
Okay.
Thomas is taking care of Michelle.
Okay, cool. We can come back if they'd like to. Ghost Pepper, and I can't see the rest of the screen name.
Chocolate, Ghost Pepper Chocolate.
Ghost Pepper Chocolate, did you want to do any introduction? No? Okay. It's cool. Okay. Well, thank you folks for being here. I would like to kind of start out with some overview stuff. And I do like that the scope of this workshop is about a single page, about writing a single comic page. So if folks want to be taking notes on this, that would be good. Let's talk about the construction first, okay? One of the things that I love about a comic book page is that there are your boundaries. And, it's 4 sides, and within that, you can do pretty much anything as long as it's within, these 4 sides here. And I think that the freedom of the individual page can be pretty overwhelming as a genre to even start with. Like, well, where do I go? How do I start with that? How do I divide it up? Right? It's one of the first things that folks can have concern with. One of the things that I've noticed with a lot of beginning comic book writing is that writers will approach the comic book page like they would approach a prose page or even maybe like a screenplay page, which is too much, oftentimes like way too much. Like they can, when the artist is going to get that script, whether you're the artist or somebody else is the artist, all they need is that which they can draw. And then also, the more that you have captions or dialogue balloons, and the longer that the dialogue balloons go on, that means the less the artist can draw, because they don't want to spend a lot of time drawing something that's just going to be covered up with a word balloon full of all the words. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into how many panels that go on the page, who are in those panels, how much dialogue is being spoken between the characters. And so ultimately it ends up being a lot like less is more, and less is more from the script standpoint. And it's interesting, if you think about major publishers or the stuff that, that is in most graphic novel sections of, say, a bookstore, there's a kind of expectation of major publishers that if they're having a writer who is getting paid by the page, that they have to put enough of, to justify the fact that they're getting paid for this page. So they have to put enough writing on it so that there's like, definitely, I'm the writer of this comic and you see some of my words on every page. And I think what I've also heard is that a lot of times writers would prefer not to have, dialogue or not to have captions on every single panel or in every single page. And so when you're the writer artist, say, you can have a lot more discretion to say, and I have no little caption, no dialogue that I want to have here. I just want to have a quiet moment, or I want to have a totally silent page and I want to let the compositions carry the story. And especially considering it's a primarily visual medium, a lot of the time, the fewer words, the better, to make for a page. And it has to do with the pacing of how fast you want the reader to be able to go through the page too. That's also an effect of amount of words that go onto a page. So I would say that to start out thinking about the page, I would recommend to start out thinking about it from a silent film writing perspective, as if you were going to write the script of a silent film. So you have to show what would be in each one of the panels. The next thing that I want to talk about in terms of number of panels, and a panel is a square space, roughly square. It can be other shapes, it can be any shape you want, it can be a rectangle. I want to talk about the amount of panels that go onto a typical page. I was doing a lot of rereading of Jack Kirby comics, and Jack Kirby, he's called the king of comics. And I really wanted to see, what does Jack Kirby do with his paneling of a page? And I have some surprising results about this guy who's hailed as one of the greatest illustrators of the comic book medium of all time. He would do really, really simple page layouts. I'm talking maybe 6 squares on a page, where you got 3 on one column and 3 on another column right next to each other, equal sized squares. Or he might do 4 panels on a page. So it's a page split into a quadrant. And in terms of panel shapes, he was not doing a lot radically different than that. And that's because of his workflow. And I also think it was a really good grammar to rein himself in, to have to put enough detail and energy and thought into how the characters and the image was going to look within the page, within the particular panel, without having to reinvent the wheel of the page format every time. Because a lot of artists, I know, contemporary artists, are trying to figure out interesting kind of dynamic panel arrangement and stuff. And the more funky that you get with the different panel arrangement, J.H. Williams the third does a lot of really cool, funky panel arrangement stuff. The more funky that you get with that, the harder the storytelling is. So in order to do those kind of funky, weird panels, I think you have to be a really, really experienced artist with a really, really experienced writer. And so I kind of tell myself, hey, if Jack Kirby wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel every time he sat down to draw a new page, you know, I should kind of trust that I can fit it in a square, you know. And it has done a lot of really good results for me. I've gotten a lot of really interesting results with not trying to do a lot of weird kind of panel work. So start simple and start manageable. So I would recommend with 4 to 6 squares on the page, 4 to 6 squares on the page. Now, the order in which the reader is going to read the story is going to go left to right, and then after that, top to bottom in American comics. It goes left to right and then top to bottom. So if you've got a reader looking at the top left square, over to the right panel, and then the bottom, and then over to the side again. Okay, that would be a 4-panel page. So 4 to 6 squares, I think is good, a good amount. Now, what are we going to talk about? What's in those? Okay, one of the best practices of what goes into, like, say, the first panel of a comic book page, as close to the first panel as possible, would be what's called a wide shot or an establishing shot. This is what's going to say what the environment is, and it's going to give the most detail of the place that all of the scene of that page is going to take place. Okay. Now, a lot of people, when they think, when I first started and I heard the idea of now I have to do an establishing shot, I would get very intimidated by that, because I would think of all the different detail and the different geography and the different elements, and I want to have it really cool. Plus, my first comic that's taking place on an alien world, so I was like, I have to get all this alien geography and stuff. I have to invent all this stuff. And then the more that I thought about this, the more I realized that when you're doing an establishing shot, it's really just a lot of simple shapes, and that the stuff that's more in the background is less detailed because it's background and the reader can't see that far. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of like your panel to think of like a camera. And I'm not even talking about an iPhone camera like we have today, that you can get incredible detail of very, very far away. I'm talking about an old school camera where the horizon gets a little blurry and we don't see those kinds of details. We don't see those buildings, but maybe we see what's up the closest. See how my hand is in the super foreground of the page, of my little square here in the Zoom screen. So that's like a super foreground, and you can't even barely tell it's my hands, right? But even with the arrangement of how you want to have your shapes, and then my body here is midground. So this could be like a building. So you can have one square that's one building, and then you have this, what's a super foreground here is, say, another building, the edge of another building. And then behind me, the background. So background, midground, foreground. And then in the background, we've got, the rough outlines of buildings that we don't even really see. But we're going to trust that the whole background is there because I've got this judiciously placed foreground piece of scenery, midground scenery, and background scenery. If you've got those 3 levels, you're going to get a good depth of field that the reader can accept. And then also through my study of Will Eisner, who's also hailed as one of the founders of the medium and really pushed it to incredible. I'm going to put it over in the chat. Will Eisner. He did The Spirit, and he did a lot of really good instruction comic instruction books about comic book illustration too. But this isn't from one of those books that I got this piece of advice. This was from a book that was a conversation between him and Frank Miller. In this book, he said that he thinks about his production design of what goes into those shots, what goes into the background stuff. He thinks about the production design like a theater production designer during the Depression, during the Great Depression in America. And a principle of good production design in the Great Depression, when you can't go and buy a bunch of props to make or build a bunch of sets and stuff, is that you would not do a whole big, huge environment, but you would do one element that makes the environment and the rest is cheating. So if we're going to do a city scene, instead of feeling that you need to draw the entire city to show your establishing shot, you can do a uniquely city object in the foreground, like say a lamppost. And then you've got your character here. And then you've got the background outlines of buildings or windows behind you. And the reader will accept, oh, outside in a city street, because there's a lamppost right there in the foreground. I can see it. So it's a lot of cheating too. It's a lot of cheating also in terms of being judicious of what is the element that's going to sell the location to the reader. And the reader, and this is the other thing that's really cool about comics, is that the reader is not as merciless, I would say, as in other medium, where they want to have it all really proven to them and shown to them, and it has to look realistic and all that. They wouldn't be like that, or it's a comic book, that's fine. If they're reading the comic, they're going to jump with you. They're going to take that suspension of disbelief, and they're going to realize that the extent of their suspension of disbelief is the extent of what the writer and the artist are trying to convey. So if they're trying to convey it and the reader is there to read your comic, they're going to accept it. They're going to go with you. And if you're doing your best to depict it of what you want to depict, they're along for the ride. And it's a win. I think that's a really, really fun, a really fun thing. So it doesn't matter like how perfect the draftsmanship of the city buildings and all this stuff is. I mean, that's really impressive, and it can give a really good impact for like one image. It's like, say, a Batman comic or something. It's Batman flying down with buildings behind him. It's all very cool. But that's not really like an emotion. That's not accomplishing storytelling. The fact that there are, dozens on dozens of perfectly rendered and perfect perspective buildings behind him. That's not creating an emotional impact for the reader. So a lot of the emphasis has to fall on the kind of storytelling and what kind of are you accomplishing the emotional impact that you're trying to get on the reader from doing that page. So that was a little tip from Will Eisner about, about production design, and to not be too intimidated with the idea of of having to do an establishing shot as, say, your first panel of a given page. The second thing, and now it gets a little more up in the air about what order folks want to do this. A good dynamic comic book page is going to have a wide shot, which is an establishing shot most usually, so it should come like first. And it's also going to have a medium shot, which is like a character. There you go. Now I'm a medium shot because I am like waist up, and we could have a second person here that I could tell, hey, let me tell you something, man, right? And if I've got the hand up, this is kind of a cliche gesture in comics, but that's okay, because we'll talk about that a little later. If I've got a hand up, I'm like, let me tell you something, man. Now I've got a super foreground. The body is the midground. And then I've got, look at that. I've got barely any background showing, right, within my Zoom screen. And I still have to have room for the speech balloon of what I'm going to tell the guy. So how much background do we have to have in this medium shot. You know, you run out of real estate real quick, I find, if you're laying down those elements in the given panel. So we've got an establishing shot, we've got a medium shot, and then a third element that is good to have on the page would be a close-up. I'm not going to like this, but here we go. That's a close-up. Okay, we've got the full head, the head in the frame. And then what else is funny is that I've still got to leave room, say, if I'm going to say something in the panel. So a close-up is different. If I'm leaving room for a dialogue, then my close-up has to be over here. I have to be off-centered so that I have room to have the word balloons going in there. So that's important too, a close-up. And then if you're having people in all of these different shots, you're naturally going to be accomplishing what is another objective of a good-looking page, which is that not all of the figures, not all of the people in the different panels should be the same size. The size of the person in the panel should be different. 1 to 2 to 3. We have a close-up, medium shot, and then, you know, wide shot where I'm like this. And if it's a wide shot of me in the city and I'm like this big walking along, that's not a lot of detail work that you need to do for that little figure. And once I really started looking at it in all of the major, you know, the mainstream publishing comics, you know, really good artists, you know, there's maybe 2 or 3 panels on a page where a really good artist will do it, just a little tiny blue, you know, little person. And that's like Batman or something, you know. That's also why Batman is such a great immortal comic book character, is that you can draw him close up and he looks cool because he's got ears, and you can draw him from very far away and you can tell that it's still Batman because of his unique silhouette. So if you can come up with a unique silhouette for your character so that you can tell it's the character from very far away, that is also an optimal kind of outcome. So we talked about a wide shot, we talked about a medium shot, we talked about a close-up, and then let's say you have 4 panels on your theoretical page. You know, the last panel can be whatever kind of you want it to be, either a close-up, a medium shot, or a wide shot. Okay, so it's like artist or writer's choice for that last panel. And if you're doing that and changing the kind of order of where the establishing shot is, you know, people will be looking in the panel. They're not going to be looking at the layout of the page. So they're going to be not judging whether the panel layout is different of every page. I don't think I've read any readers commenting on Jack Kirby's artwork and they say, and did you ever notice he does the same panel layout for many pages of the same 22-page comic? Nobody notices, because they're just looking in the panels, you know. So I think that's a good thing too. And then here's something else. If that wasn't challenging enough, think about the camera and think about the fact that you can have a straight on view. This implies that we're all equals because we're all front and even with our camera, you see? This is that you guys are in a position of power and I am just a mere comic artist looking up at the big wide world. This is what we would call a downward angle, and it can make me feel very weak and very disempowered. Put my head down even more. Man, this guy doesn't, we can't even see his feet, but we do see a lot of the ground around me. So I also recommend to have a downward angle of one of those panels on the page. And then also an upward angle from a unique kind of perspective. This is a lot cooler of me sitting at a chair. If You can see the table here, see? This is a lot cooler of a perspective than if you were to draw me at a chair like this. Does that make sense? It's much more dynamic. And I'll talk about one of the reasons why it's more dynamic and why it's fun to do, to move the camera to different cool places, is that I had a teacher at the Kubert School who taught me, and he really drilled this into my head. He drilled into my head, avoid parallel lines to the panel border. Do you see how my arm here is parallel with the side of my screen? That's boring. Boring. Head, sides, boring. Also, if I'm centered, it shows that I'm not moving. It shows there's no motion here, okay? It shows a lack of energy, a lack of dynamism, but look what now. Okay, now we've got an emotion because I took my arms and I made them go perpendicular to the panel borders. And you don't even need to draw my face, but if you've got hands on the head and you've got arms out to the side and you got a sad face, oh man, that's going to be an impactful, the reader's going to get what the emotion is of that panel. And no, you don't need to draw what the whole face is because there's hands over it. You see what I mean? There's cheats. There's different little cheats that happen every single panel. And it's because the professional artist is working at a pace of 1 page a day, 1 full page illustrated a day. So it's realistically got to be what an artist who's working a full day can get done. Those 4 or 6 panels in one day. So maybe when the establishing shot might take a while to do, but then he's like, well, I've got a close up over here. I can draw that pretty quickly. Does that make sense? It's also about budgeting of time for the artist. So that's also something to kind of to keep in mind when laying out a page. Think about what the composition of the shot is going to be and try to avoid parallel lines. If it's about stillness and it's about a lack of dynamism, then yeah, you should have a center, you should have parallel lines to the panel edge between the characters. But if you need something dynamic, here's a fun thing. Here's another fun exercise. Ooh, I'm really having fun with my camera here. Okay. Here's one thing I need to show that I'm running. Okay. I'm going to do running. Okay. Boring. Why is it boring? Because shoulder, side of the screen, you see? But if I turn it like this, is this better? See? I'm in the pocket. That's much more dynamic. And no, I'm not perfectly framed, but that's okay because I'm in motion. You see my leg? Can you see my foot over here? Yeah. So I got a foot, I got a leg. And that's kind of the motion that you can get. And that was from a front angle. You can also do a run from a downward angle and you skew your camera. It's a really fun technique. Once you learn that the panels are what create the ability of motion, then you get real free and you can go, you start changing around how you're framing the image. So a wide shot, which shows our environment and establishes our characters and our scene of where it is. A medium shot, a close-up, and then other stuff, another medium shot, another close-up, or another wide shot. And of the panels on the page, one be a kind of upward angle and one be a downward angle, just so that the camera is not always in the same exact place every time. The same exact place every time. So that's kind of about layout. That's what I wanted to talk about with regard to layout. And now let's talk about emotion. Okay, I want to talk about the reading experience of the comic. Now there are digital comics that are laid out all, based on scrolling. Basically, the reader is going to scroll through it and they're going to read it from top to bottom, like a scroll, reading it like a scroll. This is not what I'm familiar with, but I have read some like this and it's very cool. It's very interesting. I feel like it's very, it stretches time. I feel like it does this. So that's a kind of important thing to keep in mind if you're laying out comics, what would we call this? Vertically, a vertical or kind of digital layout, top to bottom, to have a sense of the time, okay? Since I'm old school and I'm a traditional comic artist, I design my comics in terms of physical pages and page turns. So here's one of my comics, is Redemptor #1. And when you open up Redemptor #1, you've got your splash page. I'm going to do this one. Okay, here's one. This is from page 3. There's page 3 here. Establishing shot of them in a kind of factory place. And then they go to a different place. We're in a different place here. They're very, very tiny in this panel. I don't think you can even see them. But they're that tiny because I wanted to show them above. It's an above angle, and then what they're looking down into. And then we've got a 2-shot here. And she asks him, could you beat him? Who are we talking about? That's why you have to turn the page. You see? It's amazing. Only comics is like this. Only comics can you design the audience urge to control, to get to the next page, to turn the page. When a writer is writing and they're laying out their prose and stuff, you can design the chapter breaks, but you really can't design the page turns in the same way that you can in the comic book, in the physical comic book. So it's one of my favorite things of writing and illustrating in this format, is getting to design what is the moment at the bottom corner. Is it a question that needs answering? Is it some little twist? Is it a problem? Is it those page turns are very, very important. And you have to know that your page turn happens on page 1. They got to turn it. And then when they got page 2 and 3, page 2 and 3 is taken at the same time. So there's not any need for suspense down here at the bottom of page 2 because the book is already opened. But at the bottom of page 3, we need to have some urgency, some reason that will want the reader to turn the page and keep going. It's very designed, and it's not an accident that they design the page turns that way. And what's also cool, when they're reprinting comics that were originally, single comics, but then they get collected into a trade paperback or something, they still have to preserve those page turns. They have to add in like a filler page or something where the ads used to be, where the ads would go. Those ads are also part of the design of the overall reading experience. So then when it's reprinted without the ads, they have to find something to put in that little spot, usually some kind of like little icon or something where you're not confused it's part of the page or not. So I thought that's pretty cool too, to get them to want to turn the page at the bottom of that bottom corner, keep them going. Also, I want to talk about your character, whoever's the main character of this page, okay? To have the main character in one kind of emotional state at the top of the page and the start of the page, and another kind of emotional state at the bottom corner, okay? This is, emotional arc, the story's progressing, something has to happen there. If the character is in the same emotion at the top and at the bottom corner, maybe we haven't done enough storytelling on that page. You see what I mean? There's enough, there should be enough that it's kind of, you know, it's distinguishable, or that we've moved forward, or something had to happen that we have a different emotional state for that viewpoint character or that main character at the bottom of the page than we had at the top of the page. So emotional register. I'm going to do a little sneak preview. Now that I'm remembering that this is being recorded, I can't maybe show as much of the unpublished stuff as I would have, but I can share this one, which is pretty fun. There's not a lot of it on it anyway. This is from my upcoming Redemptor 2, still in development. That's pretty close to being done. Here's a page of my bad guy. This is only this is again a 4-panel page. I've got an establishing shot, which shows the building. I've got a word balloon. Yeah, somebody's screaming. Then I'm showing inside the building. We've got this guy on his throne in a jade kind of space here. It's all made a room made out of jade in a jade pyramid. And he's like, yeah, and he's falling. He's in a lot of pain. And then I hear very small at the bottom, ow. It's just a simple little page of this guy having this adverse reaction, but it's not just him screaming, is my point. I don't do a scene just to show him screaming. That wouldn't be enough of to make the scene work. I needed to have that little tiny page, the little tiny panel at the bottom there, and get the ow, because that gives us our different emotional state. I don't know if folks could see from this, but this is also a downward angle. This is the big bad guy, okay? And he's the villain behind the whole story. And I wanted to show him very small, because he is defeated. Because this is a moment of big pain for him, and he thinks he's so impressive, but no, he's not. He's a little guy. And so you are looking down on him. You, the reader, are in a position of moral superiority because you're looking down on him. Isn't that cool? I'm pretty proud of that page. John, you got a question?
Yeah, it's interesting. You were able to do that and create humor through just your panel size and how you have the panels kind of not perfect right there. It's really interesting.
It's fun. And that kind of naturally, that kind of naturally comes out with kind of what the background was. So I knew usually I have an establishing shot, maybe say it's like of a square or something. But when he's in the top of a pyramid that's on top of a tall tower, it makes sense to have an establishing shot that's a rectangle, because I just want to show that building and I want to show that there, and then get to the big, this, what do they call it? There's a term I don't like, but basically the super cool panel. Whatever's like there's one panel on a page where you're like, that one's super cool. Like that one's my favorite, or that one's my, and then there's the one that's the artist's favorite panel on the page. And then maybe the one that's the writers or the readers, and it's different, but so that's one of the things to have to say, that one emotion at the start and one emotion at the bottom there. We talked about the balloons, that we have to have space to have enough dialogue exchange between the characters. Here's another interesting thing that I think a lot of folks kind of can take for granted when starting out writing for comics, is that when you're watching a scene of dialogue in a movie, or you're reading a scene of dialogue in prose, is that you can have a bunch of back and forth. And even when you've taking just the middle of the conversation, let's say we edited out the, hi, how are you? Good, how are you? Take out that kind of boring expositional kind of stuff. I'm your brother. Yes, I remember you, brother. Take out that kind of stuff. And then just get at the heart of what the exchange is, and take out the, hey, well, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, see you tomorrow, right? All of this is deadening to drama, deadening to reader interest, these kinds of things, okay? When you're taking just the heart of the conversation, we can have a turn in that conversation. There's a turn that happens where there's some shift in power dynamic or a shift in information. Something, it's like, I think of Dante crawling down the devil's legs until he passes up down to, he goes down through hell, and then he goes so far down to hell and then down the devil, and then he's like coming up the other side. So down is now up and he's coming back up. There's something that happens in a conversation where you kind of, the gravity flips. And so that gravity flip happens between A, B, A. There's something there. There's some little core of the conversation where there's that exchange, where there's that flip that happens. And that's where we want to have as close to it as possible, as close to that flip happening as possible between the two characters, or between however many characters there are. We want to see the heart of the scene. We want to see that shift happen. So for the sake of arranging or dramatizing dialogue, when you have two people in a panel, you have enough room for him to say something and then this guy to respond. And now we got to do another panel. Sometimes we can have A, B, and then I'll say something else added on to that. But the thing that I add on to it, I still have to be in the same emotional place because we're still in the same panel. If my emotion has changed based on what B says back to me, then I need to do a whole new panel as the next panel. Does that make sense? So dialogue exchanges in a comic, are very truncated, ideally, because you have to have this information come across, and the artist has to do the blocking, and the blocking has to have room to work itself out. So I think a lot of overwriting happens because the writer's trying to convey all of this to the artist, and then when I get a script that I haven't written, and I'm reading it, I'm thinking about it as an artist. And when I read page one and there's this and all this back and forth, and there's like 9 panels on the page, and every panel has, 4 characters talking, I was like, this is impossible to draw. Nobody could draw this with 4. If there's 9 panels on a page, that means I have this much room every time. And then 4 people are talking within that. There's no room. You wouldn't have any room if you put all the little dialogue balloons. Does that make sense? So to have it more, more freed up, I'd say it's closest, comic book writing is closest to like poetry or like a haiku, maybe even, because you're trying to get to as few words as possible and let the visuals be carrying it as much as they can. That's why it's a comic as opposed to say a poem or a prose work, is because that's the words are going to be doing the heavy lifting there. But when it's a comic, it's the visuals plus the words. People ask, oh, what does the reader see first? Do they read the page first, or do they see the images first and then read the text after it? And the answer to this is no one knows. It's kind of simultaneous, and different readers take it in different, at different. Some people look at the pictures first and then the words. Some people, I try not to look ahead. I won't look ahead at all, so that I'm really shocked when I get to the bottom corner, if they need me to be shocked, that kind of thing. So we talked about there's little real estate for a lot of words, but also what is so awesome about the comic book format is that through the devices that exist within the genre, we have the balloon, which shows people talking. And then there used to be the thinking balloon, the little thought balloon, which is kind of out of vogue right now. It's kind of out of style, the little thought balloon with the little, like a cloud of the thoughts, okay? What is in style right now is a little caption. a caption box, which is a small rectangle that will show what this person is thinking. Yeah, thought bubble. Yeah, absolutely. So those are kind of out of vogue right now, but they'll do little captions that can show the thoughts of the character. John, you have a question?
Can you put exposition there as well?
Yes, that's my next point. Okay. The letterer, it's usually up to the letterer, which is, when you're making a comic in a factory, a lot of the major publishers strive to, be like a factory, have a factory efficiency. We have one guy does his work and he passes it to the second guy who does their work, and then the third, fourth person, the fifth, like a factory line to get these out as fast as possible so that we can make as much money as possible. When you got a factory, the letterer is the last one who gets it in the line, okay? And the letterer can go back to what the writer's script is, and the writer has to have designed, okay, thoughts are going to be in this caption, okay? And say for Redemptor, I know I have a page that I show this on. Oh, but it's from the end of issue 2. I can't show that. I'm sorry. I can at least perform it. There are 2 different caption voices in Redemptor 2. Is that a coincidence? Is it design? I'll leave that up to you. Okay, there is the exposition, which are in orange. That is a third-person omniscient narrator who will tell you, hey, this is this environment. Up in the Jade Pyramid, that will come in an orange box. But if a character is having a thought, that's in, like, say, a pink box. And better than that, it should be a color closely associated with that character. So this character's thoughts will always be in pink. And even though you don't have to tell the reader, they'll figure it out. It's kind of an intuitive thing. It's really cool. So now let's get a little wild. You've got your third person kind of narration that will tell you kind of location or time or setting the stage, okay? And then you've got this character's thoughts who are in pink, and we've got my buddy here, and his thoughts are in orange. He can have an orange thought, plus we've got the dialogue balloons. So within one panel, you can have third person narration, third person, dialogue, which is spoken, right? And then you've got first person interiority, first person thinking of the character A, and you've got first person thinking of character B, and it's all at the same time in one panel. You show me another medium that can give you that. No other medium can give you that much versatility to show exterior reality, interior reality, and to accommodate multiple interior realities at the same time is what you can get with the graphic novel. I could see Lloyd's wheels turning. I know. Right? It's a very fun potential that's unique in the graphic novel in the comic medium that you can accommodate.
I was thinking about in the 2000s there was a Batman Superman comic that did a lot of that.
Yeah, Jeff Loeb.
Yeah.
Jeff Loeb's Batman Superman. Yep, that was good, and that was a real high point in the Batman Superman team up comics, because now we've got over 80 years or something worth, something close to that. It's like 75 or something years worth of Batman Superman team ups, and there's Jeff Loeb writing this Batman Superman series, and it was so good because he would have one side of the page would be like Batman's interior narration, what Batman thinks about what's going on, and then on the other side is like Superman, and they're like different points of view. They're completely different, philosophies, different, perspectives on life. And then, the images are the third person, what you would objectively see. But you've got Superman in one ear and you got Batman in the other ear, and it's incredibly dynamic. Very, very fun. Brian Michael Bendis did this also, I believe, with Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. They had kind of double interiority going in some of those Jessica Jones comics, which is pretty cool. Speaking of so the caption boxes can show the character's thoughts. Okay. When I was preparing for this workshop, I noticed that in a novel, I teach this with my fiction writing class, is that we have, third person omniscient, which is like your Tolstoy or your Dostoevsky, which says this narrator is like God, and this God can see into the thoughts and the hearts and minds of every character in the present tense, also knows the complete and utter history of all the characters, their families, their secrets, and they will tell you all this. They will tell you all this, okay? And it's in the past. So it's third person, omniscient, past tense a lot of the time, okay? For a comic book, it's read in the present tense, and much like screenwriting for film, it tends to be written as if it's happening also in the present tense. So when I was thinking about those captions, I was thinking about, is there like a third person or even a first person example where the narrator is describing the events of the comic book having happened like a long time ago? And I was kind of hard pressed to find any examples of a big time difference between the happenings of the story and the situation, the situ of the narrative caption voice. So it's all pretty, happening right now. I'm reading it right now. I'm looking at it right now. And the narrator voice might have a little bit ahead of the reader, but not much. It's just one of those things that I was like, I haven't seen, maybe it's just the stuff that I'm reading, but it doesn't tend to be usually done that way. Also think about, like, say, a detective story. If you're reading a detective story that's a comic book, do you want the detective telling you, like, I solved this crime, it was really hard, here's how I did it, and then you're reading trying to catch up to this guy who knows, what happened? No, you want to be there with the detective, finding it out with the detective. You want to be with the thought processes of the detective as they're getting the new information, processing the new information. This is what we would call, say, the viewpoint character, the character that the reader most closely associates with or experiences the story as. This is also what makes Batman one of the greatest characters of all time, because he's the world's greatest detective. So wouldn't you like to be the world's greatest detective, the world's greatest martial artist, and get to perform these skills in the course of your regular everyday life? Fantastic. Who'd say no, right? Do I have any questions so far on this? Any of this material that I've covered? I know I don't have a lot of different screens, but folks can put up a little hand, and I know how to read the hands. Oh, I'm glad you think so, Romain. Thank you for being with us. It's fun. I mean, this is a real wild, it's a wild west of a medium, you're completely unlimited. You know what else really sold me and what made me not want to write for film or TV so much anymore and just go into comics, is that so much of film and TV design is thinking about how much you can reasonably ask to be invested of millions of dollars of the telling of your story. Like, okay, granted, my story, like anybody's story, would take millions of dollars to tell. Like that's just to start. That's just to read somebody's screenplay. It's like, okay, if I say yes to your screenplay, it's going to cost millions upon millions of dollars that are not the writer's dollars or the director's dollars in order to do this story. Okay. With a comic book, first of all, no negotiation. You have an unlimited budget. Unlimited. Will it cost you $3 trillion to film your comic book? No problem. You drawing it, you have an unlimited budget. If you have the hours to sit and put the detail work, you can do the detail work. That's fantastic. To be completely free. You're only limited by your imagination. And then every time you want to figure out something that you want to tell, but you don't have the art skill for it, or you don't have the writing skill for it, it's a problem. It's a problem, and you get to solve it and you figure it out. You know, it's so thrilling. I love it. I love problem solving. So I can look at something that was never would have thought I could have drawn that, and then I draw it and I'm like, I did that. I solved that problem. I accomplished that. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, and I also want to point out that Romaine has a question in the.
Oh yes, I see.
Yeah,
new one.
but I want to, like, Lloyd's shown me some. I guess I'm not sure they're called. They're like graphic novel poems, and I wonder if you could talk about that and how to construct that.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's coming up right now. It's a new, don't you think, Lloyd? There's more being done.
Yeah.
That's like illustrated poetry.
Yeah, I first got introduced to it back in 2016. So it's only within the last 10 years where it's become a growing thing.
That's
Comic
booming.
poetry comics. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that here's my stance on that, because I've read some of those. I like it best when the image and the words provide, divergence.
Yes. Yeah.
I like that. That's what I like. Other people want to say, if you're talking about a rose in the line of the poem, then they'll draw a picture of a rose. It's more representational. It's more, the hand is held. It's a little more, but I want, if you're giving me a line of caption about a rose or something, I want something that is, different than that. That's going to give me some counterpoint to that. I feel like, there should be a good degree of tension between the text, the text kind of stuff and the visual stuff. So
Like
John's favorite page with the, what's that, Daniel?
Put a thorn in there.
Yeah, something, something that's gonna at least be not like literally the thing that was the line of, my love is white as the stars, and then to have a big panel, a wide shot of like the whole page is just stars. I'd be like, okay, but again, it's not something that I've done myself. I haven't done any graphic poetry. So, I mean, this is a whole new field that's kind of coming up. So, there's lots of ways to do things, and it's the artist's choice, the writer's choice. If they want to do, my love is white as the stars and show a field of stars, go for it. That's awesome, And Romaine, I know you had a question there in the chat. Let me get this. Woohoo. Oh, Romaine, have you read my work? With so many classics becoming graphic novels, is this a growing field? Okay. One of my graphic novels available now is Senor Zoro, The Curse of Capistrano, which is my adaptation of the novel by Johnston Macaulay. See, he's an upside down Zoro.
Wow.
If you go through all the different adaptations of Zoro, all the different books and covers and stuff, you will be hard pressed to find a smiling Zoro on the cover, let alone an upside down Zoro. So I mention this because it's just a funny thing that I found as I was studying for different covers before I ended up going with that one. Why is it a growing field? The reason graphic novels adaptations are a growing field, have you noticed, Romaine, that
Mhm.
that there's a bunch of different Great Gatsby adaptations out there right now?
Yes, yes. And
The
Octavia Butler, hers, yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. That was the bestseller list, Octavia Butler's Kindred. The
yeah.
reason behind why there are so many adaptations of Great Gatsby is because Great Gatsby just came into the public domain.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
As is also Senor Zoro, The Curse of Capistrano, because Johnston McCulley's original Zoro novel
Mhm.
is public domain. So publishers can publish, if Random House wanted to do a new edition of Curse of Capistrano, they
Mhm.
can do that new edition of Curse of Capistrano, and they do not have to pay, royalties to the estate of Johnston McCulley.
That's good. That was one of the questions I was going to ask. My son draws, and I won't say what he's really interested in, but he's like, I keep getting people asking me to do a graphic novel of this one story. And I said, well, you're going to be legally bound with all this stuff, but.
So let me talk. I want to share. Yes, Romain, please let me share with you about public domain, because this is my absolute favorite field of interest. Okay. Shakespeare. Okay. Shakespeare is hundreds of years ago. There wasn't copyright law in Shakespeare's time, but Shakespeare didn't invent the story of Romeo and Juliet. This was an Italian story that he heard, and then he dramatized it his way, changed it however he wanted. This is an amazing artistic tradition that we dive into the past, the best of the past. And in this country, we have more stringent copyright laws because we have Disney in this country.
Okay.
I'm not exaggerating.
I believe it.
It is the Disney Corporation that is singularly responsible for the copyright laws as they exist and affect Americans today, because they needed to keep proprietary rights over their characters, their representations of those characters. Now let's pause for a moment. Snow White, invented as a character or story by Walt Disney?
No.
No, public domain. So your son can absolutely draw any Snow White story or version that your son wants. However, we cannot draw Walt Disney's Snow White to look like that with the color and stuff. That is illegal. That would be copyright infringement.
Gotcha.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are certain identifiable characteristics that are unique and are copyrightable. The execution of an idea is copyrightable in the United States of America. And even that is only copyrightable by like maybe 100 years, pushing it. 100 years. So you have to know the history, the publication history. And then, talking about other countries don't have the same copyright laws that we do. So, things might be illegal to distribute in America because it's copyrighted in America, but they won't go after it for European publication or in Asia or South America.
Interesting.
So you have to know where you're going for. And then if it's online, forget about it. It's a World Wide Web. You know what I mean?
Not really. So
if you're showing something, okay, so fan art, what's called fan art. It was my wife, Danny Gomez, actually, who made this groundbreaking realization to me. She said, I was saying there's here's the groundbreaking insight that she gave me. I was saying, by Batman or whatever, it's just fan art. I'm just a fan of Batman, drawing my fan art Batman. And she goes, well, isn't it all? As in, the only one who was doing not fan art Batman was like Bob Kane, the original creator of the image. And then there's Bill Finger doing the writing of Batman. Like that was the authority. So what is it that we look at the comics now and we're like, that's a real Batman story, or that's a real Batman picture, and my Batman picture that I spent 2 days to draw, that's not real. That's just fan art. You know, I'm like, what is it? It's who's paying you. Is it, are you being compensated for it? Right. So really, we're just talking economics then. We're not talking quality. We're talking, you know, we're talking who has approval, approval. So if I want to draw a picture of Batman and have it in my Instagram feed, you're welcome, DC, because I just provided 1 second of advertising for your character that you can sell comics on. I cannot draw a Batman comic, but you know, they can. And they're not coming at me being like, take down your Batman pictures, Piluso. You know, not yet anyway. You know, but if they did, I'd be like, no problem. I'll put more of my Redemptor and Senor Zoro pictures up. And, you know what I mean? It's like,
and then what they do is they like it and more people come, and then
so social media is like, it's for social, right? It's like, and it's also for advertising for everybody. You know? So
thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I hope you keep encouraging your son to pursue with the arts and can I say something else that I found? My amazing teachers at the Kubert School, that's the best school to learn comic illustration, is the Kubert School. It's over in New Jersey. They have a residency program for like 3 years. I cannot recommend it more highly. But what I learned is that you will only ever get better by drawing a page, a full page of sequential art that tells a whole story. Maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's not so but if you have done 1 page and then you draw a second page and then you draw a third page, the third page will always be better than the first page that you drew. You only get better, but you only get better with the more pages that you draw. So I, proudly said at the beginning of our workshop that I've drawn over 100 pages this year. I'd say with a full-time job and a full-time family, and I'm pretty proud of that. I'm proud of that amount that I accomplished during this year. But a professional artist can draw, 22 in a month, a page a day, the full pencils of it. So they can do 22 a month. So 22 times 12 is what a real professional, full-time working artist is able to do.
Wow.
And they'll be better. They're always better. That's the amazing thing about this field, is that you can observably see your improvement from, like say, even the beginning of a story, when I did Redemptor #1 and page 1 of Redemptor 1, I feel like page, 1 of Redemptor 2 is 100 times better than the page 1 of Redemptor 1.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I had to let go of it. And this is also what I love about the publishing of comics, is that you can't go back. George Lucas is free to go back and re-edit Star Wars if he wants to. That's his prerogative. Back when he owned Star Wars, he could re-edit it, add better special effects. And yet most of the planet is like, please don't. It's out. It's done. It is what it is, and just leave it. And we like to re-experience it like how it was when it came out. I feel it's important to be able to shut a door, and say, now this is done and I have to move forward. I may not have had it perfect, but it's done and I did my best. Every time I look at one of my pages, I'm like, that was the best I could do, because I'm not just the writer or the penciler on my stuff. I do the writing, the pencils, the inks, the colors, and the letters. Because I'm a very traditionalist. Technically it's called a cartoonist. It has nothing to do with cartoons, so it's better to just be like sequential artist or graphic novelist or something. But I like to have the control over all of the different elements of the production. And so for me, I can draw the pencils of 1 page a day, and I can do inks, maybe 2 pages of inks a day, and then coloring is a whole other day. So when I say I did like 100 pages this year,
That's a lot.
it really was. And I'm sorry it took, something like it's going to be like 11 months between issue 1 of Redemptor and issue 2 of Redemptor, but it's way better. It's way better. Issue 2 is way, because I've learned a lot through doing it, and I learn more and more every page. It's very exciting. So if your son ever gets discouraged or something, be like, you're going to be better. Finish that page, and then move on to the next one, because you'll always be more skilled with the next page. And then the most fun is when you get the levels up, when you surprise yourself and you're like, oh man, I did that. I didn't think I was going to do it, but man, that's a different level of skill right there, and it never comes when you want it to, when there's like a really hard page and you're like, oh, I got to really do it, and then I got to level up for this page. And then it's like, and it doesn't happen, but you got to get it done. But then when you were least expecting it, you're like, oh man, that looks like it was, really good, so let's be open to that too. You'll never get the level up when you want it, but you will always level up once you've completed 1 page, and then a 2nd page, and then a 3rd page. Every one of those is going to be a level up from the one before it, always. So, and shot first. He did, John. That is a fact. I believe it's in all the relevant encyclopedias and Wikipedia. It's and did shoot first.
What was the name of that school again?
The Kubert School. I'm going to put it in the chat there. It is in New Jersey. They do hold online classes. They have a whole section of the Kubert School's website that is dedicated to their online studies. And I cannot recommend them more highly. They have been tremendously generous. And then also the international scope of the talented teachers that they have there, Maria Sanapo in Italy, she's teaching me from Italy. I'm here in California. She's in Italy. I'm like, how's it in Italy? She's like, how's it in California? We both wish we were in other place. It's fun. It's fun to make international friends,
This has been really great. I mean, I came late because I had another meeting I had to go to, but when you described the layout of the page, the overall and all, that's also a great thing to keep in mind when you're just writing.
Yeah.
All those things. But my question is, just last night at the indigenous thing with Michelson and John, I was remembering a book that I loved called Ano Ano the Seed. And it was an illustrated book on a Hawaiian huna process. But it was just beautifully done. But it wasn't a comic book, but that's what really struck me when I read it the first time. Was it's a beautiful story, like poetry, sort of. But it was also just a full page covered pictures of things going on. Is that considered?
Yes. Yes. This is what I also love about this medium so much, is that it covers everything. It is so inclusive. My first book that I ended up going into the comic, I did a comic adaptation of my own book, right? It was an illustrated book, so I had illustrations in there, but the emphasis was on the words. The emphasis was on the words because I think, oh, I can't draw that, if there's an image on the page and there's text on the page, we're in comic book territory. I mean, it's really that wide. It's that wide of a thing. Illustrated novels, when I was a little kid, I was reading these illustrated novels, the illustrated classics. I just found one in the bookstore the other day and I had to pick it up. Great Expectations. And it was, there's the text and then there's like a little picture that shows what's happening in the story, I'm like, that's awesome. But I mean, it's all one big spectrum, right? You think about ancient Egypt, I mean, they're on the spectrum too, right? Because there's text and there's image and there's an interplay happening and you have to know the grammar of it in order for it to make sense to you, But it's absolutely, unlimited budget, unlimited freedom. And this is what I love about, about these Culturama, the workshops and the teaching opportunities that I get to have, is I get to come and say to people, I get to remind everybody that they're free. They can write, they can draw, anything that they want. Your only limitations are inside your own heart. You can write it, you can draw it, you can do anything that you want to do. Do you have the freedom to get it published or sell it or have people buy it? That's different. That's economics. But you have the freedom to do it. You can do anything that you set your mind and your heart to. It's unlimited. Thank you for putting the title in the chapter.
And children's books are almost there, but they have, the writing is separate. It's not like in the frames, but I've always thought children's books are right up there with poetry because they say so much in so little space.
That's the best. It's the best. Really good. Do I have other questions? Any questions?
One quick one.
Can we hear from Victor real quick? Victor, and then did I have another question?
Well, it's just a really quick one after.
Okay, Daniel. And then Lloyd. Okay, so we'll go Victor and then Lloyd and then Daniel. Victor, go ahead, unmute.
Okay, my question is, as far as I can't draw very well, so I'm more into the writing. How do you write to make it more easily adaptable to a comic book page? Like how would you write prose in order to make it more adaptable to a comic book?
Great question, Victor. How would you write prose? Victor's question was, how would you write prose to make it easily adaptable into a comic book page? Okay. I would recommend that the location. Victor, would you mind muting and then unmuting when you want to ask?
Sorry.
Because I'm hard to hear. Okay. I would recommend that you include the visual information that is important for the story to be told. So if you want to have it in New York City, and it's, you have to say New York City. You can't just be like in a city, because New York City is different than Los Angeles, is different than Phoenix, is different than Paris, So to be specific with the location is important. But then, once you've said what the location is, you don't really need much more than that. I've found that with working from scripts that are from other writers, I need the location. I need the feeling, I need the mood, because part of that's the tone is going to come from me too. So you're like, okay, we're looking at very spooky, very spooky late, very early morning in New York City where there should be more cars out, but there aren't. Something like that. One sentence, I know what I would draw for that. I can know what I would draw for that. I don't need much more description of that. And then also people, character design, how to make something that's easily adaptable for an artist. It comes down to character design too. So, I think it's important not to be too particular or too elaborate with any descriptions, because the artist is going to take care of the characterization in the most efficiently reproducible way. The most efficient design that they can draw 4 times a page is what the character will look like. One of the characters that has a great, I don't know if you know Spawn. Victor, you ever hear the character Spawn? Okay, I love Spawn. Todd McFarlane is one of my favorite, professionals in the field of all time. And I've drawn some pictures of Spawn. Oh my Lord. But I know, thank God for his big red cape, because all those details of all the spikes and all the stuff, I mean, just to draw him one time takes a really long time if we're going to do a full body picture. But because his design of the character is so elaborate, he has a big red cloak, so he doesn't have to draw that big elaborate costume design every time, because he can just draw a red cloak and the head, and then that's it, So there's efficiency that goes into the character design that your artist will appreciate. Don't be like, he has to have a little ascot in his pocket that's pink with purple polka dots on it or something. It's like, I have to draw this ascot every panel. Is this essential? It would make sense if that's where the murder weapon is. Then hell yeah, I'll draw that little ascot different every panel you want, man. If that's the murder weapon, that's going to be the twist at the very end, because that's a relevant, important detail. So you've got to be easily adaptable. I think it's more a matter of knowing the artist's time and what is a reasonable expectation for your artist to be able to do, because you have to think about it not just in terms of like an actor puts on one costume and then they get to play that throughout the scene. The artist has to draw the costume, draw the background, draw the emotion on the face also, and the lighting has to design that. It's like doing every single thing except what are the words that are coming, so to have a sense of what goes into the art, I think makes it adaptable too. Also Victor, locations, to have a mindfulness for how many locations are required in the story, mindfulness of number of locations, mindfulness of number of characters in those locations. Okay. The fewer, the better. If you have few locations, then I'll do a really, really good location, and I'll be able to do it from different angles, and I'll know it really well, because I'm going to know it, I have to draw 4 times a page, so I'll get a real good sense of it and stuff. But if we're never going to see this location again, it's kind of sad, because I got to know it really good after drawing it 4 or 5 times, or 8 times. I know it really good. Thank you for being with us, Illa. Did I miss a question from you? I don't think so, but I appreciate you. Thank you. Is that helpful, Victor?
No, you didn't miss it. No, you didn't miss my questions. Just listening.
Thank you for being with us.
Yes, that was helpful. I appreciate that. I will take that in. I'll take that to heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you. And I had a question next from Lloyd, and then I think it was back to Daniel. So Lloyd, I have a question.
Tips in the workshop about how to avoid overwriting on the writing thing.
I'm having a hard time reading your signal, Lloyd.
Limited real estate on the page for dialogue and things like that. Do you have any more tips? I can
based on what I was able to discern from the limited mic capability, it was additional tips like limited real estate. Okay, I got it in the chat there. Do you have any tips on avoiding overriding dialogue? Okay, this is my tip. Draw it yourself. Any writer of comics needs to know how to do a layout on the cheapest paper you can find. Okay, I like my yellow notepads. you need to know how to draw out a layout where you're just doing like a little rough thumbnail of what it is. Yeah. And what I like to do, I found this size of notepad that was like this. That's like this size notepad with lined paper. And I write out what my page will be, what my comic page will be on this little notepad that's this big. Because I'm limited by the space of the page. I can't fit too much writing in there, even though I want to. I can't because it's only this big of a page. So I put physical boundaries on myself to constrain and focus and contain the creativity. So one of them for the art side is that I'll do thumbnails. These are called thumbnails, where it's a layout. People are like, oh, I only do stick figures. I could only do stick figures. I don't know how to do anything more than that. Well, you know, there is thousands and thousands of comics out there that are just stick figures. And people will read them because the buy-in from the reader of a comic for suspension of disbelief is that if you put it in front of them and they read the first panel and they like it and they got an emotional reaction from it, or they're intrigued and they want to keep reading it, they'll accept it. They will go on with you. They will not be like, it's only stick figures. I won't read only stick figures. But there will be people who will be like, I'm not going to read a comic with stick figures. And then you don't get to have those people read your comic. Sorry, but they won't. But there are so many people that will read it if it's only stick figures, right? So people get a lot of like preconceptions in their head about what is acceptable within a form or what's not acceptable with a form. And then there's other artists that are out there that are not trying to ask, you know, will this be acceptable to people or not? They just do it. They just do it. And they say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do my best to do this. And if that is acceptable to you, thank you. And I appreciate you. Thank you. But if it's not acceptable to you, I'm sorry. Maybe the next one is more your style. You know, I have so many friends, and I'll tell them about, oh, I'm doing this comic. I'm really excited about this. I tell them I chop their ear off. And then they're like, oh, that's cool, man. And then you know, and then I say, and I'm also doing this little thing, I'm developing it. And then they laugh and they're like, that sounds awesome. I'd read that. You know, and I'm like, what about the thing I just described? And it's like, that wasn't their cup of tea. They were being polite. I understand. But, you know, to have a kind of expectation that if you just do your best into everything, you know, that there's going to be some readership there that will, in good faith, it can meet you there. They can accept you. They'll meet you there, you know. And what you were describing, Lloyd, with the Philippines and the artists there, and to kind of make a story about that, you know that there's an audience. You know there's an audience. You know there's a talent. You know there's an authority. And who needs to give you permission? Whose permission do you need to do this? No one's. You know, yours. Yeah, you have to let yourself do the thing. You know. And you know, so much, if there's been one thing that I've learned in the trajectory of my artistic life, is that, you know, the point of my life as an artist is to say yes to myself, you know, and only I can say yes to myself. Editors, managers, publishers, producers, agents, their job is to say, no, yes, do this, let me direct you this way, right? That's their job. You know, my job is to say yes to the art that I want to make. You know, so that's another kind of, oh, and avoiding overriding dialogue. Avoiding overriding dialogue. The size of the page, Lloyd. And then you know what else? It's still going to be too much. However little you do, it still won't be, when it comes down to the lettering. I've heard that a lot of writers will do their own lettering in their comics now. I'm reading it a lot more, and I'm like, are you using a pen name in the lettering credits or what? Like, how is it that you're doing the lettering on your comic and yet there's somebody's name that's written there as as a letterer? I don't know, but I do my own lettering, and I say I do my own lettering. So that means that when I'm putting in the words that I thought, I had my script, I had it all drafted, and I had that line of dialogue, and then I go in and I put it, and I'm like, that damn artist, he didn't leave me enough room. It's me. I'm cursing myself, right? But then I have to make it work. I have to make it fit, and I have to take some words out, and sometimes it ends up better, and sometimes I have to go, problem solve. But it's ultimately nobody's gonna care if it was one word or 2 words longer. That would have made it better. They're just reading it in the course of maybe 3 seconds, and then they're on to the next thing, so to keep the forward momentum also ourselves as creators, I think, is important. We can pour over we pour over this one page, or we pour over this one moment. I gotta get this perfect. And then when it's the reader's experience, I'm like, what did you think of that scene? And they're like, oh yeah, that was good. My favorite though was this moment when you did this. And it's like when he goes, ow, that was my favorite. And it's like, yeah, that took me like 30 seconds to do, but yeah, I'm glad that was the favorite moment. You never know. And that's what's amazing about the art form, is that it's unique for everyone. And it's when I'm pouring over all that energy and stuff into this one panel or this one page, I want to get it perfect and stuff. I have to remind myself there's something that's with me. I am working something out, that I'm putting so much time and energy into that. I'm like, what's my deal? What am I hang about? What am I really worried about or stressed about, that I'm putting so much energy into this one part of the story? What's my deal there? And judging by the nodding heads here, folks know what I'm talking about, and that's okay. You work it through and you accept it, and you move on to the next thing. But my favorite thing absolutely is not when I've put a lot of energy into something and then somebody says, good job on that thing you put a lot of energy into. It's when I've done something and then somebody's like, I really like this little detail. I remember I had this teacher, Tom Mandrake, amazing artist, amazing teacher. I learned so much from him in the class I took from him at the Kubert School. And I got to draw a Batman story for him for the class. And part of it was in a garage. And in the garage, I had a little, like a centimeter. I drew it this big, a centimeter of like a pinup calendar. A pinup girl on a calendar in the back of this seedy garage where the bad guys were and Batman was And he's like, that was my favorite detail, the little calendar. He's like, that's what it's all about, And I'm like, thanks, man. I didn't know anybody would, but him looking at my art, he's like, that's the best. That little centimeter that you did there, that was a good instinct, I'm like, yeah. You never know. And that's the fun of the genre too.
I'm remembering a lot of certain comics that I wouldn't read because they were overwritten. I mean, it's just like all words. You go, there's too many words in this. I'm not going to read this.
I get that.
So I don't know if they fail that way. I actually thought there was something wrong with me that I didn't want to read. I didn't want to read them.
That's okay. And that's, it's not for you. And that's fine. There's other people that are like, give me the words, give me all the words, There's a kind of tendency, a lot of writers right now are doing a lot of one word balloons or caption boxes, but a lot, hey, sup, what's good, this, I don't know, and there's these one word, like mammoth or something, 2 words back and forth that goes on for pages. And some people, it's popular and some people like it. For me, I would like more compressed, please. I like it compressed. I'm like, I don't need to do one word back and forth. And, I want to see what the heart of the story, what the conversation is. I'd say most people would kind of be inclined to that kind of writing style. So I do tend to, yes, you heard me talk about how it's important to say yes to yourself and all that. And those writers are saying yes to themselves for one word, exchanges back and forth, but it's different. Everybody's different. And it's okay. If it's not okay for this person, it'll be okay for the next two or three people next to them, you know? So there's room enough for everybody. There's room enough for everybody. You can do whatever you want. It's awesome. And that's, of course, not just for comics, but for anything, any writing genre at all. You can do anything you want. When you're an artist, your job is to say yes to yourself, whatever your medium is, to express yourself, to make something new into the world, to take a blank page and put something there. There was no words on that page, and then you put words on that page. That's an achievement. It's a work of art. Every writer is an artist. Every writer is an artist through and through. And there's never been one of you on this planet before in your body as it is right now.
Nice.
There's never been one of you before. So there's, you know, fill those pages with however exactly you want to do it, you know, however exactly you want to do it. Do I have any, I know my
John.
time is.
John is asking a question.
John is, yeah, John.
I was just going to say your time is just about up. Maybe we can, maybe if there's questions outside that we could do. Next up, we have Ishan Lai. I hope you stick around for her. Fantastic.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody
Yeah.
for your time and attention. And I hope that I was able to provide a little bit of inspiration, a
Very
little
much.
bit of energy, a little bit of enthusiasm to get you to, you know, dive into comics with me, dive into comics with your writing, and to get energized and excited. Thank you for being with us, Connie. Absolutely.
It was great. Great.
So real